Hello, good afternoon everyone. My name is Intania Cahyaningrum with name 240204036. Today I would like to present my final project, which is project of language assessment. So as Mr. Daud mentioned before that on this semester we just focus on speaking and listening skills. So therefore I designed several assessments that are related with those skills. So in this presentation I will explain about the assessment and how they can be used to evaluate students' speaking and listening abilities. And then at the end I will explain about the reason why I choose the assessment. So before I start to explain about my language assessment project, I will tell you why I separate between speaking assessment and listening assessment. Because those assessment is focused on different skill. So it's focused on different competencies. That is why it need to be separated. A speaking assessment is used to evaluate students' ability to produce language orally, while listening assessment is used to evaluate students' ability to understand information that they hear. So those assessment is definitely different. Now we will move to the identity first. So course identity, subject English, name, the teacher name is absolutely me, Intania Cahyaningrum, senior high school, year in 2025 until 2026. Student grade is on grade 11 or phase F. The materials that I choose is transactional conversation, buying and selling at the market. And the focus skill is listening and speaking. Firstly, I will explain you about the learning outcomes. So by the end of phase F, students are able to use English appropriately to communicate with teachers, peers, and others in various contexts. So in the end of the phase F, or in the end of the lesson, my students are expected to be able to communicate in English appropriately with other people, not just understanding by themselves, but also they can implement it in their daily life like that. And then the students are able to use and respond to transactional conversations about buying and selling at the market by applying the appropriate generic structure, vocabulary, and then grammar, tenses, pronunciation, intonation, clarity, and contextual suitability accurately. Okay, now we will move to the learning objectives. Number 1, by the end of the lesson, students are able to recognize vocabulary, expressions, and transactional conversation language features related to buying and selling at the market through listening activities correctly. Of course, before we assess the students' final assessment or summative assessment, we should to assess the easiest first, like the vocabulary. So the first assessment will be assessing students on their vocabulary. Number 2, after listening to several transactional conversations, students are able to identify specific information such as products, prices, quantities, discounts, and expressions used in the conversation correctly. Number 3, after understanding the vocabulary and expression from the listening activities, students are able to use appropriate vocabulary and transactional expression to respond to simple buying and selling situations orally. Number 4, after analyzing model dialogues and listening materials, students are able to analyze the use of vocabulary, expressions, pronunciation, intonation, tenses, and generic structure in transactional conversation about buying and selling at the market appropriately. And the last learning objectives is by the end of the lesson, students are able to create and perform a transactional conversation about buying and selling at the market fluently by applying appropriate vocabulary, expressions, tenses, pronunciation, intonation, and then the generic structure. Okay, and then I will explain you a bit about the learning materials. One is about generic structure of transactional conversation. So in the transactional conversation, there are three generic structures that we need to pay attention about. Number one is opening. So the opening is used to start the conversation politely, like good morning, hello, excuse me, can I help you? That's called opening in transactional conversation. And then two is transaction, or the main conversation. This is the main part of the conversation where the buyer and seller exchange information about goods, prices, quantities, or payment. So the functions is asking about items, asking and giving prices, asking quantities, bargaining, agreeing, or refusing. There is several example of expressions in transaction or main conversation. Is that I would like to buy for example, bananas. Do you have discount? For example, can I get one coffee? Can I get a vegetable? Those are an example of main transaction. Okay, and after that is closing. This is the last generic structure on transactional conversation. So for example, there are several example expressions of closing in transactional conversation, like thank you, you're welcome, have a nice day, see you again. And now it's time for me to explain about several language assessment for speaking skill. So the first assessment is vocabulary assessment. So for the vocabulary assessment, I choose vocabulary matching test because the matching word assessment is very appropriate. It helps to measure students' vocabulary mastery related to buying and selling in the market. And then through this assessment, through this activity, students are required to identify and correct English words with their correct Indonesian meanings. This allows the teacher to assess whether students understand the meaning of the vocabulary or not, and whether they can recognize the words accurately or not. That is why I choose this assessment. So for each assessment, I have created the blueprint, and the blueprint consists of 6 indicators, including learning objectives, materials, indicators, question form, cognitive level, and then question numbers. And the blueprint is to make the students understand easily what will the assessment about. And then after the blueprint is the worksheet. And don't forget to create the key answer of the worksheet. And after that is the last component. The last component is scoring system. So usually, to make it clearly, to make it transparent, I usually make scoring system. And then number 2 is grammar assessment after vocabulary assessment. The assessment name is grammar accuracy test. And the reason that I choose this assessment is because it can measure students' mastery of grammar related to buying and selling at the market. And then by answering the multiple choice and essay questions, students will show their ability to use correct grammatical structure in transactional context. Therefore, the assessment helps evaluate students' readiness to communicate accurately in speaking activities. And then there are also one purpose of this assessment is that to assess students' ability to use, of course, grammatical structure commonly used in transactional conversation. So just like vocabulary assessment, there are blueprint to make the students easy to understand, and then the worksheet, and then key answer, And then the last one is scoring rubric. The next one is pronunciation assessment. So whenever I have known about my students' vocabulary and grammar ability, I will next assess them about their pronunciation ability. So I think this assessment will be more complicated than the previous assessment, because the assessment method will be work in pairs, and then they will create a dialogue, but they just need to read the dialogue. They don't need to memorize the dialogue. So the assessment name is Dialogue Reading Performance Assessment, and the reason why I choose the assessment is this assessment is allows students to demonstrate their pronunciation skills in a meaningful communication context by creating and reading a transactional dialogue that they have made about buying and selling at the market. Students are required to pronounce vocabulary, expressions, and using appropriate grammar related to the topic accurately and clearly. So I also provide an instructions for my students, so to make it practical. So the instruction is, first, students work in pairs and choose their own partner, and then after they choose the partner, they should create a short transactional conversation about buying and selling at the market consisting of at least 6 sentences. And then number 2 is the dialogue must follow the generic structure of a transactional conversation, including opening, transition, and closing. And after that, after the students completing the dialogue, they should to read it aloud in front of the class after the teacher called their name. They should to perform it in clear pronunciation and an appropriate volume. I also provide example dialogue for the students. It's just like the example is between seller and buyer. Seller: good morning, can I help you? Buyer: good morning, yes, I would like to buy some apples, please. And then the seller: sure, how many apples would you like? Buyer: I would like 1 kilogram of apples. How much are they? And then seller: they are 20,000 rupiah per kilogram. Buyer: okay, I will take 1 kilogram. Here is the money. Seller: thank you, here is your change. Buyer: thank you very much. Seller: you're welcome, have a nice day. Buyer: goodbye. So they should to follow the appropriate generic structure too. So the first one, I will give them the worksheet and then scoring rubric. So it's not that complicated that before. I mean, for the components, like there is no the blueprint, but I provide them instruction instead. And then the fourth one is intonation assessment. So in this assessment, I want to know their intonation, my students' intonation, how they express. They should to be expressive to read the transactional conversation that they have made. So the assessment name is Dialogue Intonation Performance Assessment. Why am I choosing this assessment? So why did I choose this assessment? Because by combining dialogue analysis and oral performance, this assessment enables students to practice intonation patterns before applying them in spoken communication. So it also allows the teacher to evaluate the accuracy of students' intonation use in a transactional context. And then I also provide my students the instruction to make it clear. Number 1 is work in pairs. I think this is just like the assessment before, is that pronunciation assessment. The instructions kinda similar, but not similar. Work in pairs with the same partner from the pronunciation assessment, so they may choose the same partner as the previous assessment. Number 2, use the transactional conversation about buying and selling in the market that you have created previously, which is the transactional conversation dialogue in the pronunciation assessment. Number 3, mark each sentence with the appropriate intonation pattern, whether it's rising or falling intonation. Number 4, then read the dialogue aloud in front of the class following the intonation mark you have provided. So the students are expected to use intonation as what they write on their worksheet. Just like when they write rising sign like this, they should do like use that intonation correctly, like this. For example, the seller said, "Good morning. Good morning. Can I help you?" Because, for example, the students write rising sign, so they should to make it real. They should make it very real, and then clearly, "Can I help you?" instead of "Can I help you?" That's very inappropriate. And then after they mark, no, after the example of dialogue, I also provide scoring rubric. I create scoring rubric to make the score of the students transparent. So for the final assessment, I choose summative assessment. And then this assessment technique is role play performance. So this assessment, the students will play their role that they have chose, like seller and buyer, because this is transactional conversation in the context in the context buying and selling in the market. So there should be seller and buyer. And of course, I provide instructions because this is final assessment. So I shouldn't make my students confusing how this assessment about. I mean, what is this assessment about? How this is will implementing in the class. Number 1 is work in pairs and choose your own partner. So the students may choose the same partner, but I suggest them to choose another partner, not the same one. Number 2, create a long transactional conversation consisting of 30 until 40 lines about buying and selling at the market using the worksheet provided by the teacher, because this is final assessment, so the dialogue will be more long than previous assessment. Your dialogue must follow the correct generic structure: opening, transactions, and closing, and have a different concept from other groups. So the concept between one group and another, it should be different. If they have the same context with other groups, one of them should change the context. That's the rules. Number 4, the dialogue should last approximately 3 until 4 minutes. 5, your dialogue must include bargaining or asking for a discount, such as, "So can you make it this price lower?" Like that. "Is there a discount for example, bananas?" Like that. 6, submit your dialogue transcript via Google Classroom. So after creating the dialogue, students should submit their dialogue to Google Classroom, not just on the teacher text, but also in Google Classroom. Number 7, perform your dialogue in front of the class without reading the script. So they should memorize all the script, all their dialogue, because this is final assessment. Use appropriate attributes or props related to your concept. So they should use appropriate attributes just like their concept. So if the attributes like different with their context, it will reduce their grade, their score. 8. The assessment will cover vocabulary use, grammar, pronunciation, and intonation. 4 indicators. I also provide them an example dialogue consisting about 30 until 40 sentences, so they will never be confused. And then before the final assessment started, I will give them the worksheet. And then after that, there is also scoring method. On the scoring method, there is 4 aspects. Is that vocabulary, grammar, pronunciation, and intonation, just like I mentioned before. So, why did I choose performance assessment for the final assessment? I mean performance like role-play assessment. Because role-play assessment is chosen for the final test because it provides students with an opportunity to use English in a realistic buying and selling situation. Through the role-play activity, students demonstrate their ability to apply vocabulary, grammar, pronunciation, and intonation in a meaningful transactional conversation. So, in addition, performing the dialogue without reading the script allows the teacher to assess students' speaking ability more authentically. I have done explained you about language assessment for speaking skills. Now I will move to the language assessment for listening skill. There are 4 language assessment for listening skill. Number 1 is vocabulary recognition assessment. So the assessment name is vocabulary listening dictation. And I choose the assessment is because this assessment is used to measure students' ability to recognize vocabulary through listening activities by listening to the teacher's pronunciation and writing both in the English and Indonesian. Students demonstrate their understanding of vocabulary relating to buying and selling at the market. So there are an instruction for this assessment because I don't want to make my students confusing and wondering how this assessment will be implemented. Number 1 is listen carefully to each vocabulary word pronounced by the teacher. Number 2, there are 20 vocabulary words in this assessment that will be demonstrated by the teacher, that will be read by the teacher. Number 3, identify each word correctly, write its correct spelling in the worksheet, and provide its Indonesian meaning. So when the teacher read one vocabulary like price, they should do write correct words in English, and then they should do write the meaning in Indonesian. Number 4 is the students will have 20 seconds to complete for each answer. So the vocabulary list that will be read by the teacher is 1 price, 2 expensive, 3 affordable, 4 discount, 5 bargain, 6 purchase, then customer, merchant, product, merchandise, payment, receipt, refund, exchange, available, quality, quantity, recommendation, convenient, and then transaction. They should be able to know the meaning and then the correct spelling of those words. And before the assessment conducted, I will give them the worksheet first. Of course, the worksheet will be a blank worksheet, but there are a table consist of 3 tables: the number, vocabulary in English, and Indonesian meaning. So the students should to fill the blank, like the blank table. I also provide on my Word, on my Microsoft Word, the key answer of the assessment, and then scoring criteria. So one number correct is 1 point. One number correct is 1 point. And then number 2 is specific information assessment. So after I assess the vocabulary, I will assess the student's specific information assessment. The assessment name is listening for specific information assessment. And why am I choose this assessment? Because this assessment can measure students' ability to identify and recall specific information from spoken text. Through open-ended questions, students demonstrate their understanding of important details presented in the audio or video, allowing the teacher to assess their listening accuracy and comprehension. So before the assessment conducted, I will tell my students the instructions of the assessment. Number 1 is listen carefully to a short transactional conversation about buying and selling at the market. The video will be played only 3 times and will last approximately 5 minutes. So this one video, the duration is only 5 minutes. And also I have put the video link in my Word. Number 2, answer the questions based on the conversation you have listened to. 3, write your answers on the worksheet provided. Make sure to spell the vocabulary correctly. Number 4, submit your worksheet to the teacher after completing the assessment. So the assessment worksheet consists about essay questions, just essay questions. There is no multiple choice questions. So I want to make my students to listen carefully to the audio, because if they are not listen carefully, they will miss the correct answer. And there is key answer of the assessment. Scoring technique, such as I mentioned before, that I should make scoring technique for each assessment, because I want to make it clear. I want to make it transparent. And then assessment listening. Number 3 is listening comprehension assessment. So the assessment name is listening comprehension assessment, just like the title. And why am I choose that assessment? Because this assessment is designed to evaluate students' ability to comprehend spoken text by recognizing key information, understanding important details, and interpreting the overall message conveyed in the audio. The use of multiple choice questions enables the teachers to assess students' listening comprehension accurately and objectively. So the assessment method is multiple choice questions. So I think this will be easier than before, because the assessment before is consist just about essays, but on the comprehension assessment there is only multiple choice questions. So I think this will be easier, but also difficult. Because why? Because the length of the audio is more long than the previous one. So as usual, there is an assessment instructions. 1, listen carefully to the audio, just like before. I also provide the link on my Word, on my Microsoft Word. So while listening, pay attention to the main ideas and specific details presented in the audio. Choose the best answer. Choose the best answer between A, B, C, or D for each question, and mark your answer by crossing X like this on the correct option you choose. Number 4, you may take note while listening if necessary. So usually based on my experience, on the listening class, I will use one blank later to make me easy to get the specific information. So once I hear an important information, I will write it, and then I just will make it into paragraph when the audio and the video stop played. Number 5, students are not allowed to discuss their answer with other students. Yes, because I count it as cheating. 6, complete all 20 questions within 30 minutes. So that's very long times to complete the assessment. 7, after completing the assessment, submit your work on the teacher text. So for this assessment, I provide students the blueprint to make them to spoil them what will appear into the final exam. No, I mean, this is not the final exam, but I will provide the blueprint. There is 6 indicators, just like before. 6 indicators, including learning objective, materials, indicator, question form, cognitive level, question number. So the cognitive level will be different, just like question number 1 until 2 is just remembering, or the cognitive level is still number 1, C1, but the question number 3 until 4, it will be C2, or understanding. So on one assessment there are several cognitive level, so the students should be careful. After provide the blueprint, I have created the worksheet for students, multiple choice 1 until 20, and then the key answer of the worksheet of the questions, and then scoring criteria for each number. So for each number, students will get 1 if the answer correct. So now we just move to the final assessment. So what is the final assessment about? The final assessment is transactional tailored listening comprehension assessment. Just like comprehension assessment that I just explained you, but this final assessment is more, I think it's more difficult than the comprehension assessment that I have mentioned before. So this assessment will consist of 10 multiple choice questions, 5 short answer questions, and 5 essay questions. So this will be more complicated than previous one. So the reason why I choose this assessment, because the assessment is very appropriate for the final assessment, because it measures students' listening comprehension comprehensively through various question types like multiple choice, short answer, and essay. So multiple choice question assess students' ability to identify vocabulary and specific information. Short answer questions measure their understanding of key details, and essay questions evaluate their ability to interpret and explain information from transactional conversations. Therefore, the assessment provides a comprehensive picture of students' listening achievement in the topic of buying and selling at the market. So because this is complicated, this is such as complicated assessment, so I should provide my students an instruction for it. Number 1 is students listen carefully to the transactional conversation about buying and selling at the market. So there will be 2 videos in this assessment, not as before, because in previous assessment we just have 1 audio, but it's longer. The first video lasts approximately 2 minutes, but the second video approximately 9 minutes. But video will be played only twice. And I have put the first and the second videos link here. Number 3, students pay attention to the vocabulary, specific information, main ideas, and details presented in the conversation. So basically, I have spoiled what students need to pay attention for. So I have spoiled the questions of the assessment. Number 4, students answer all questions based on the information they hear in the video or audio using the worksheet provided by the teacher. Number 5, complete the assessment consisting of, such as I mentioned before, 10 multiple choice questions, and then blah 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 blah. 6, students write their answers clearly in the space provided. 7, students check their answers before submitting the worksheet, because they should to make sure that they have answered all the questions correctly, right? So I will give them several minutes to revise their answer, whether it is already correct or not. Number 8, students submit the worksheet to the teacher after completing the assessment. And the last one, the total time allocation for this assessment is 40 minutes. So I think this assessment is more longer, so the time allocation is more long than the previous one. So I have provided an assessment blueprint for students to make it understand, so to make it easy to understand what the questions will be about. Such as before, there is 6 indicators on the assessment blueprint. I've mentioned before, right? So I don't need to mention again now. And then before I implement, before the assessment conducted, I will give them the worksheet. I will give my students the worksheet, and then key answer, multiple choice assessment, key answer, short answer questions, and then key answer for essay questions. But I will not provide a key answer for essay assessment, essay questions, because the students should express their own opinion for the questions. So I think I don't need to put the key answer for essay questions. Of course, there will be scoring criteria, because this is summative assessment, so it's important. Okay guys, I think that's all for my final project presentation about the assessment plan for speaking and listening skills. Thank you for your attention. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.